1973 was the equivalent of loving Oasis in 1994, or the Stone Roses in 1989. In other words, although it didn't make you the coolest in your class, it was certainly nothing to be ashamed of. One of the best things about Cameron Crowe's film Almost Famous is that it recognises this, gives Rod his due. Then, when the band pulls away in the bus, it's every pitch to tell the story they're all listening to. It's just about the only evidence of the defence that I have at my disposal now, because within a few years, there was plenty to be ashamed of. Britt Ekland, for example. For several other interchangeably blonde women who weren't Britt Ekland, but may as well have been. And Do You Think I'm Sexy and Ola, the 1978 Scotland World Cup song. The chorus, which went, Ola, we're going to bring the World Cup back from over there. And his obsession with LA and the champagne and straw boaters on album sleeves and the drawing on the cover of the Atlantic Crossing and the Faces live album, on which the last thing you hear at the end of the side 2 is Stuart saying with a nasty leer, "Thank you for your time and your money." And the all-purpose session musician Substones plod rock that can be found on any of his post-Faces work. Hot Legs being the template. Now, there's a man who's never let you down, a friend, a remarkably dryly when I once confessed my soft spot, and it's true that Rod's record is not without his blemishes. And yet I owe him a great deal. His first 4 or 5 solo albums contain the first ballads that I ever loved. Country Comfort, Tomorrow's a Long Time, Handbags and Glad Rags, Reason to Believe. I'd rather go blind, loads of them. And I'd still rather listen to a ballad than anything else. And he was the first singer to teach me that there was an art to interpretation. His best songs were invariably covers, and I had always presumed I was a music snob even before I knew anything. The covers were inauthentic somehow and inevitably inferior. That only the originals really counted. But when I checked out these originals, I discovered to my confusion that quite often he had improved upon them. Obviously, he wasn't a better singer than Sam Cooke, but Stewart's take on Bring It On Home to Me was a raw raucousness and a swing that I couldn't hear in Cooke's version. And Dylan's Mama, You've Been On My Mind seems to me to not as much more than a strum, an exquisite strum with one of Dylan's loveliest and simplest lyrics, but a strum nonetheless. Stewart's evident love for the song rescues it, or at least spotlights it, where Dylan almost throws it away with the implication that there's plenty more where that came from. And Stewart's reverence seems to dignify it. Invest it with an epical quality, Dylan denies it. Interesting. That's an interesting take. Interesting take. Stewart's evident love for the... sorry. We're done with this page. There are the records I own because of Rod Stewart's Bobby Bland's, his California album from which Stewart borrowed It's Not the Spotlight, and though the cover is flatter and less piquant, Rod judiciously elected to leave out Bland's really rather unpleasant film-clearing gargles from an entire Bobby Womack collection. Oh my god, there's so many brackets. And once I knew about Aretha and Bobby Bland and the Temptations, I was led on to B.B. King and the Four Tops and Atlantic and Chess. And this is all pretty good stuff. I would hate not to have discovered it when I did. If I had been similarly smitten by Elton John or Jeffrey Tull or Mike Oldfield, all of whom were competing for my attention at around the same time, it's possible that I might not be listening to music now. Because people who stick with pop music the longest, it seems to me, are those who entrust themselves at a tender age to somebody like Stewart, somebody who was clearly a fan himself. Those who fell for the Stones got to hear, if they could be bothered, Arthur Alexander and Solomon Burke and Don Covey. Zeppelin fans might have been moved to seek out Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf. Yeah, so that makes sense. So when I listened to the White Stripes, I then was, coerced to then listen to Robert Johnson and Sunhouse and the blues music, and that kind of enriched my knowledge and love for music, and then that took me further into music. And now I love hip hop because echoes of Sunhouse and echoes of Robert Johnson start living within hip hop. That's why hip hop is my favorite genre these days, because it still has the dominance of that song. The song, because it's still very much a black man's genre, and it has the soul still. Even like the most basic hip hop song has a soul still, and they're also the most innovative genre of music, I think. The trap is getting caught in a generation. Gospel music was the first music recorded. What about Gregorian chant? What about just alcohol? What about just poetry, but it's done to a beat? I know there was that as well. Gospel would have come when religion came. Music was around before religion was around. Like tavern. Well, when was religion around? Religion didn't start for 2,000 years ago. So I mean, there's music for that. There's music for 2,000 years ago, I think. Which serving man is passing information critical to me, especially when they're able to figure out what the man was thinking about me. You're not very interested in human beings, are you, BK? I went very far back, sorry. Bit off topic there. Oh, Australia. Hey, sexy. Gotcha. So I was singing Hallelujah. But not Hallelujah, That was okay. So I'm really far back. Shit. Once you break free from generations, you're good. Carter family started recording music first. No, it was no problem. I forget now. The Prison Blues. That was for the Carter family, wasn't it? Prison Blues. Chain Gang. Gregorian chant. So Gregorian chant was the first. They got the entire Britney Spears catalogue in Gregorian chant. What about just poetry? Yeah, I think poetry was around before music. What about classical music? Classical music was around a long time ago, Beethoven. Not even that, before Beethoven, whoever Beethoven was influenced by. And Wolfgang, what's his name? The guy who's blind and deaf. The composer who's blind and deaf. Still able to compose music. Freak nature. What's his name? Was it Beethoven? No, it was Beethoven. It was someone else. Lead Belly. Yeah, this is way for Lead Belly. Beethoven was way for Lead Belly. Roll over, not Beethoven dog. Beethoven the musician. Is the music still playing? No. Okay. Recently, Elvis Costello, another old Rod Stewart fan, offered to produce him and thus offer him a route to redemption. I have the same fantasy. I like to choose the songs. I've got a couple ideas, but they're trade secrets, obviously. And a sympathetic band, a group of musicians who could... Sorry. I just choose songs as folky stomp. Every pitch tells a story. I reckon I get some pretty good work out of him. Maybe Elvis and I could work together. Although we'd have to do most of the nod twiddling. I'm not very good at that. On the other hand, why should Rod bother? He's done okay without. He's done okay without us. All right. Number 8 and 9. What? Okay, number 8. Okay. And 9, right? Okay, so number 8 and 9 is together. Sorry, then. Okay. Number 8 and 9 is Can You Please Crawl Out Your Window, Bob Dylan, and Rain by the Beatles. Okay, I haven't heard either of those songs. By expressing my preference between a Rod Stewart version of a Bob Dylan song and a Dylan original, I exposed myself. I'm not a big Dylan fan. I've got Blonde on Blonde, Highway 61 revisited, obviously. And Bring It All Back Home and Blood on the Tracks. Anyone who likes music owns those 4. And I'm interested enough to have brought the bootleg series volumes 1 to 3 that have live album we know now wasn't recorded on the Royal Albert Hall. Views of the time out, mind and love and theft convinced me to shell out for these 2. And well, although I can't say I listen to them very often, I once asked for Biograph as a birthday present. So with that, and the bootleg series, I've got 2 Dylan box sets. Also now I seem to have copied Little World, Gone Wrong, the Basement Tapes, and As Good as a Beam to You. Although this I suspect is due more to my respect for Greil Marcus, who was written so perversively and prevalently about Dylan's folk and blues roots, than to my Dylan philia. And I have somehow picked up along the way Street Legal Desire and John Weasley Harding. Oh, and I bought Oh Mercy because it contains a lovely Most of the Time, which is on the High Fidelity High soundtrack. There are, therefore, around 20 separate Bob Dylan CDs on my shelf. In fact, I own more recordings by Dylan than by any other artist. Some people, my mother say, who may not own 20 CDs in total, would say that I am a Dylan fanatic. But I know Dylan fanatics, and they would not recognize me as one of them. I have a friend who says logged onto the Dylan website expecting rain most of the day at work, as if websites were CNN and Dylan's career with the Middle East. Those who own 130 Dylan albums, including a 14 CD box set of every single thing Dylan recorded during 1965, apart from Get This, Highway 61 Revisited, anything he recorded during 1965 that same people would want to own, he's pretty keen. I can't quote whole songs, just the odd line here. It's not like with Taylor Swift, it's like, I might know every song off by heart, but not every song, but most of the songs. But it doesn't mean that I'm a fanatic. It just means whatever he's saying. It's like there's fanatics and then there's people who just like the obviousness of the artist that is present. Yeah, I understand what he's saying. I get this. I understand this guy. But I like One Headlight by his son. Dylan's son? Lead Belly. Ah. Whose son? There's a very clever English artist called Emma Kay who has done a series of artwork which consists entirely of her verbal memories of Shakespeare's plays. If I were to do the same for the life of Bob Dylan, it would consist of the following list. Zimmerman, Hibbing, Minnesota, New York Coffee Houses, Joan Baez, the band formerly the Hawks, Electricity, Judas, Motorbike Crash, Never As Good Afterwards, Is That True? I fear I might be getting the Crash confused with Elvis's Spell in the Army. Sarah, Who Don't Know, Divorce, Eyeliner, Christianity, Farm Aid, lots of tours. This seems to me in way too much knowledge. Why on earth am I able to name his own hometown, and why should I recall that he fell off his bloody motorbike? I will not attempt a similar list pertaining to the life of William Shakespeare because it would be too shaming. But suffice to say that it would not extend much beyond Stratford upon Avon, Anne Hathaway and her cottage, The Globe and the Dark Lady, Jane Austen, Bath, unmarried, once went to my sister's house, apparently, although some time before my sister moved there. It must be right, mustn't it, date-wise? Obviously I have no one but myself to blame for my ignorance of our major literary figures. I'm not responsible for my intimacy with the life of Bob, however. That's the fault of all sorts of other people, friends, music lovers, university professors, editors at my publishing house. It's hard to avoid, mostly because his status as a major poet allows one to like him without inducing feelings of intellectual insecurity that usually accompanies devotion to a pop star. I suppose I resent that in my book, for you're either in or you're out. And if you're in, then get in properly and find a bigger place in your heart for the stupid stuff. Bop and duty is a punk. As for the stuff that you can pass off as poetry, obviously I wouldn't ask you to find as big a place in your heart for bop, but then that's partly the trouble. The best music connects to the soul, not the brain. I worry that all this Dylan devotion is somehow anti-music, that it tells us the heart doesn't count, and only the head matters. Elsewhere in this book, you find fanciful comparisons between literature and music, specifically novels and songs, but you sure can exhaust a great song much more quickly than you can clean out a great novel. And partly, I suspect, because I am not interested in Dylan as a poet. I've exhausted Bob, or at least the bits of Bob that I am interested in. I wish I hadn't. There's a density and a gravity to Dylan's songs that you can't find anywhere else. But even more than a great mining the scene for all it's worth to me, I regret never having heard any of the songs at the right age in the right year. What must it have been like to listen to a Rolling Stone in 1966, aged 19 or 20? I heard White Riot and Anarchy in the UK in 1976, age 19. The enormous power those records had then was mostly being lost now. Much of the shock came from their volume and speed and brevity, and records consequently became louder and faster and shorter. Listening to them a quarter century later is like watching an old film of Jesse Owens running. You can see that he's won his races, but all sense of pace is being wiped away by Maurice's screen like Rolling Stone. However, his song's perfect. It just doesn't sound fresh anymore in Victorian London. They used to bum phosphorus at senses in an attempt to see ghosts, and I suspect that the pop music equivalent to our obsession with B-sides and alternative versions and unreleased material. If you can hear Dylan and the Beatles being unmistakably themselves in their peak, but unmistakably themselves in a way we haven't heard 1,000 million times before, then suddenly you get a small but thrilling flash out of the spirit. And it's as close as we'll ever get. Those of us born in the wrong time to knowing what it must have been like to have those great records burst out of the radio as you weren't expecting them or anything like that. Can you please call out of your windows that I accept a minor Dylan track, one of his snarly and less poetic but downs, but it is from my favourite period, electric and with the crisp, clean organ sound. I haven't heard it a million times before, so it sneaks its way to the car tapes now, and Rain is a great Beatles song from a great year in their career, the year that Oasis had been trying to live in for the last 10 years, and it's wonderful to listen to a Lennon-McCartney song that doesn't quite have all the pulp sucked from it. I'll get sick of both those songs in the end, of course. They just don't last long enough to keep their mystery and magic forever, but they'll do it for now. Like in the... I'll go back. Okay, so say there's Being Obsessed or Not, Dylan's. The Wallflower is Dylan's son. Okay. Jacob Luke Dylan, yep. One Headlight. Does he talk at all about RATM? What's that? Certain songs can be played out. I'm reading exactly what he says, isn't it? I don't know. All in the early 90s, all you ever heard on the radio was Guns N' Roses. Yeah, Guns N' Roses, yeah. What about Nirvana? Is that mid-90s, more mid-90s? No, because he's done 93, didn't he? Those bands are too much for my ears. Rage Against the Machine. Alright, yeah. Don't abbreviate me, mate, okay? Don't take that shit. What was it? Ratum. You didn't put them in cuffs. I should do this thing where we actually listen to the songs before I before I read the chapter next time. Alright, so I'm going to put a pin in there. We've done a lot today. Next one is 10 and 11, so we'll do 10 and 11 next time. This is actually first edition, this book. And I just put lipstick on it. So, I should wrap it up or something. It's worth like $5 and he's still alive. And I got it from the op shop for $1. I know, I guess I got a first edition from Marley. And yeah. What I remember, 10. Yeah, I remember. 1 second. I'm gonna sing. I'll just do. Because I gotta do. What time is it? Oh, that fucking Mr. Hitler. You see that? Mr. Hitler? Okay. Why do you let that have that name? I don't know.